I never thought my own parents would try to rob me. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. I grew up in a family where sacrifice was the magic word. Not their sacrifices, mine. From the time I was old enough to understand words like duty and obligation, it was drilled into my head that I owed my parents for being born. They never said it outright, but the message was always there. Every achievement, every milestone I reached, it wasn't about me. It was about what I could do for them. Is it a test? Good. Now how does that help the family? Win an award? Great. So when are you going to start giving back? Get a part-time job in high school? Perfect. Hand over your paycheck. I never got to keep a cent. Every dollar I earned went straight into their hands, swallowed up by their never-ending expenses. And it wasn't like we were struggling. My dad had a decent job and my mom worked part-time. But they lived way beyond their means, expensive clothes, new gadgets, takeout multiple times a week. Yet somehow there was never enough for school supplies or doctor visits. Unless I paid for them. Learned early that arguing was useless. If I pushed back, I was ungrateful. If I kept money for myself, I was selfish. Didn't I know how much they had sacrificed for me? So I kept my head down. I studied hard. I made a plan. Get the hell out. And I did. The moment I got a full scholarship to a university across the country, I took it. My parents fought me on it, tried to convince me to stay local, to help out. Translation: keep being their personal ATM and unpaid babysitter. I refused. They threw a fit, guilt-tripped me for abandoning the family, but I left anyway. College was the first time I felt free. I worked part-time, saved every penny, and most importantly, I never told my parents anything about my finances. They still tried to demand money, but it was harder from a distance. And when I graduated and landed a high-paying job in the city, I thought I was finally done with their nonsense. I was wrong. Fast forward a few years and I was thriving. I had worked my ass off, climbing the ranks in my company, and it finally paid off. I got promoted to a senior position with a massive salary bump and a hefty year-end bonus. My boss, Mark, was a no-nonsense guy who valued hard work, and he personally congratulated me. Felt good. My coworkers planned a small celebration at a nice restaurant. For some reason, I made the mistake of telling my mom about it, and of course she invited herself, along with my dad, and my 2 younger siblings. I should have said no. But a small part of me, the part that still stupidly craved their approval, thought maybe this time they'll be proud of me. So they showed up. They didn't congratulate me. They barely even acknowledged my achievement. Instead, they acted like they were the guests of honor, ordering the most expensive drinks and meals, laughing loudly, treating my coworkers like their guests. And then, right in the middle of dinner, my mom put down her glass, smiled, and said, "Well, this is wonderful. Since you owe the family for all we've done for you, we'll take that bonus off your hands." Just like that. Like it was a given. Like the money I had earned through years of hard work was automatically theirs. I blinked, thinking I misheard. What? My dad nodded like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, you know how much we've supported you. It's time to give back." Supported me? They drained me dry for years. I opened my mouth to argue, but my mom cut me off, voice sharp. "Don't be selfish," she said. "This is what family does. We take care of each other. And right now we need it more than you do." The entitlement in her tone made my blood boil. But before I could even respond, my boss laughed. Not just a chuckle. A full-on, sharp laugh that cut through the tension like a knife. That's when he swirled his drink, turned to me and said, "That's funny because she just got another raise." Silence. My parents froze. My mom's fake smile twitched. And then Mark wasn't done. He leaned forward, smirking slightly, and said, "Oh, and just so we're clear, our company has very strict policies against financial abuse. If anyone is pressuring you for money, you let me know." My parents paled. My mom let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, we were just joking." "No, you weren't," Mark said smoothly, still smiling, but his eyes? Ice cold. My dad coughed, suddenly very interested in his drink. My mom's hands tightened around her fork. I could have let it go. But I was done being their doormat. So I took a slow sip of my wine, looked my mother dead in the eye, and said, Actually, since we're talking about debts, I think it's time we settled ours. And that's when the real chaos began. The restaurant fell into dead silence. My mom's smile vanished. My dad's grip tightened around his glass. My younger siblings, who had been mostly quiet the whole time, just stared, wide-eyed, like they were witnessing something they weren't supposed to see. I set my wine glass down, leaned back in my chair, and repeated, slow and deliberate, "Since we're talking about debts, let's settle ours." My mother let out a forced, breathy laugh, waving a hand like this was just some misunderstanding. "Sweetheart," she said through gritted teeth, her voice laced with fake warmth, "this isn't the place to discuss family matters." I smirked. "Why not? You had no problem bringing up my bonus in front of my coworkers." Across the table, my boss, Mark, chuckled into his drink. He was enjoying this way too much. My dad's face darkened. "That was different," he said, his voice tight. "We're your parents. We took care of you." I scoffed. "Took care of me? You used me. You drained every paycheck I ever made. Every time I tried to save, you guilt-tripped me into handing it over. And now you're sitting here, expecting me to fork over my bonus like it belongs to you?" The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. My mother's eyes darted around, suddenly aware of the fact that people were listening. She forced another smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "We just thought you'd want to help the family," she said, voice sugary sweet. "After everything we've done for you." Oh, she was still playing that card? I tilted my head. "Everything you've done for me? You mean how you took every cent I made as a teenager? How you forced me to pay for things while you blew money on crap you didn't need? How you tried to stop me from leaving for college so I could keep being your free babysitter and ATM?" My dad slammed his glass down, the sound echoing through the restaurant. "Watch your tone," he snapped. I stared at him, unfazed. "Or what? You'll guilt me into submission? That doesn't work anymore." My mom's hands clenched around her fork, her mask slipping. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed under her breath. I smiled. "Am I? Or are you just mad you can't manipulate me anymore?" Her face twisted. For a moment, I thought she might actually throw her drink at me. But before she could say another word, Mark, who had been watching this train wreck unfold like it was free entertainment, leaned in with an amused look. "Actually, I'm curious," he said, voice casual. "How much does she owe you?" Silence. My dad's jaw clenched. "This is a family matter," he muttered. Mark just nodded, swirling his drink. "Right. That's what I thought." Then he turned to me. "I hope you don't feel obligated to give them anything." I smirked. "Oh, don't worry. I don't." And for the first time in my life, I saw fear in my parents' eyes. They knew. They knew I was done. The restaurant was dead silent. For the first time in my life, my parents had nothing to say. They had always been the ones in control. They set the rules, dictated what I owed them, and made sure I never questioned it. But now, the script had flipped, and they had no idea what to do. My mother recovered first. She let out a sharp breath, smoothing out her napkin as if she wasn't visibly shaking. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "This isn't like you. I don't know what's gotten into you, but we're your family. We take care of each other." I let out a low, humorless laugh. "That's funny. Because the only taking care that ever happened was me paying for everything while you spent money like it grew on trees." Her eyes twitched, but she kept the smile plastered on her face. "Don't exaggerate," my dad muttered, his voice tight. "We did what any good parents would do." "Good parents?" I cut in, tilting my head. "Good parents don't use their child's paycheck to fund their lifestyle. Good parents don't guilt-trip their kid into handing over their college savings. Good parents don't try to sabotage their own child's success because they're afraid of losing control." My dad slammed his glass onto the table. The sound echoed through the restaurant. "Watch your tone," he snapped. I stared at him, unfazed. "Or what? You'll guilt me into submission? That doesn't work anymore." My mother's hands clenched around her fork, her mask slipping. "You're embarrassing us," she hissed under her breath. I smiled, calm and collected. "Am I? Or are you just mad you can't manipulate me anymore?" Her face twisted with frustration. For a moment, I thought she might actually throw her drink at me. But before she could say another word, Mark, who had been quietly watching the whole thing, leaned in. He was smirking like he was enjoying this way too much. Actually, I'm curious, he said, voice casual. How much does she owe you? Silence. My dad clenched his jaw. This is a family matter, he muttered. Mark just nodded, swirling his drink like this was nothing more than an amusing business negotiation. Right. That's what I thought. Then he turned to me. I hope you don't feel obligated to give them anything. I smirked. Oh, don't worry. I don't. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my parents' eyes. They knew. They knew I was done. The rest of the dinner was awkward as hell. My siblings sat frozen in their seats, staring at their plates. My parents barely spoke. They just sat there, stiff and silent, too humiliated to say anything more. By the time the check arrived, I was ready to get out of there. But before I could reach for my wallet, Mark beat me to eat. Consider it a celebration gift, he said, dropping his card onto the tray with a wink. My parents paled. They had come expecting a free meal and a fat check from me. Instead, they got nothing but humiliation. I didn't say another word as I walked out of the restaurant, but I should have known. They weren't done yet. I barely made it home before my phone started blowing up. My mother's texts came in rapid fire, one after another. That was completely unnecessary. We are your family. You wouldn't be where you are without us. Your father is furious. You embarrassed him. How could you do this? And then the real threat. If you turn your back on us, don't expect us to be there when you need us. I stared at the screen, and then I laughed. When had they ever been there for me? I blocked her number. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I locked down everything. New passwords, two-factor authentication, fraud alerts on all my accounts, because I knew my parents. They weren't going to let this go, and I was right. The next morning, I woke up to an email from my bank. Security alert. Someone has attempted to access your account. Twice. I checked the login attempts. The IP address was from my hometown. It was them. They still had my old banking information from when I was younger. They must have assumed I was dumb enough to still be using the same passwords. I wasn't. I immediately called my bank, reported the attempts, and locked everything down even further. Then, for good measure, I sent my mother one final text. Nice try. Hope it was worth it. She read it instantly. No reply. But I knew she got the message. And I knew this wasn't over. I thought locking down my accounts would be enough. That cutting off their access and making it clear I wasn't playing their game anymore would make them stop. I was wrong. Because my parents weren't just desperate for money. They were desperate to control me. And when they realized they couldn't manipulate me through guilt or financial threats anymore, they tried something worse. It started with a phone call from my landlord. Hey, just wanted to confirm something, he said, his tone casual. You're moving out? I frowned. What? No. Why would I be moving out? He sighed. That's what I thought. Your parents called. Said you were breaking your lease. And moving back home. They even tried to get the paperwork started. For a second I just stood there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. They were trying to force me back. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. Do not, under any circumstances, listen to them. I'm not moving out. They are not on my lease. If they contact you again, let me know. My landlord chuckled. Figured it was something like that. Just wanted to confirm. No worries, you're good. After I hung up, I just sat there, staring at the wall. They were never going to stop. Trying to steal my money wasn't enough. Now they were trying to get me kicked out of my apartment. I thought that was rock bottom for them. I was wrong. Because a few days later, I got a call from HR. I was in the middle of a normal workday when my HR rep, Kelly, called me into her office. She looked serious. Too serious. We received a complaint about you, she said the second I sat down. My stomach dropped. A complaint? From who? She sighed. We can't disclose that. But the allegations are serious. They claim you've been, she checked the report, then looked back at me, her eyes narrowing. Stealing from the company. Committing fraud. Engaging in unethical behavior. I stared at her. What? I figured as much, Kelly said, giving me a knowing look. But we have to take these things seriously. My mind was spinning. Someone? No, not someone. My parents had reported me to my own company. They weren't just trying to take my money anymore. They were trying to destroy my entire career. They sent us an email with evidence, Kelly continued. Bank statements, screenshots, even a recording. I felt my hands go cold. Bank statements. I already knew what they did. They still had my old banking info. They must have taken past transactions, money I had sent them over the years, and edited them to make it look like I was embezzling. But the recording? That was new. Kelly clicked a file and a distorted voice filled the room. Hello. I work with company name, and I have information about my name. She has been stealing money from accounts. I have proof. You should investigate before it's too late. My stomach turned. The voice was fake. Either AI generated or someone disguising their voice. But I could feel my parents' fingerprints all over this. They were trying to ruin me. I took a deep breath. Kelly, I swear to you this is a lie. I don't know who sent that, but I can guess. She leaned back, arms crossed. Go on. So I told her everything. The manipulation. The entitlement. The bank fraud attempt. The fake lease termination. By the time I finished, she let out a low whistle. Damn, she muttered. That's next level. Yeah, I said, still reeling. And I can prove it. I worked in finance. If there was one thing I knew, it was how to track transactions. I pulled up my bank records showing that the transactions they claimed were fraud were actually payments I had sent to my parents over the years. Every single one had a note attached, groceries, helping with rent, mom's request, and some even matched text messages from my mother asking for money. Then I showed Kelly the emails from my landlord about the fake lease termination stunt. She shook her head. This is insane. Yeah, I said. So what now? I need to escalate this, she said. Do you mind if we bring in legal? I nodded. Do it. A few hours later, I was in a meeting with legal and corporate security. They went through the evidence my parents had sent and immediately found holes. The recording? AI generated. The bank statements? Sloppy Photoshop edits. The anonymous tipster email? Traced back to my parents' home IP address. And that's when Mark, my boss, walked in. Arms crossed. Looking pissed. So, he said, throwing a folder onto the table. Are we pressing charges or do you want me to handle it? I blinked. Wait. Pressing charges? The legal team exchanged looks. Well, one of the lawyers said, this technically counts as defamation and fraud. They made false claims to damage your reputation and employment. If you wanted to pursue a case, we could. I just sat there stunned. I had spent years letting my parents get away with things. I had let them guilt trip me, use me, steal from me. But now, they had gone too far. I met Mark's gaze. What would you do? He smirked. Personally? I'd scare the hell out of them. I thought about it. Then I smiled. Let's do it. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end this. For years, my parents had used guilt and manipulation to control me. They had drained my money, stolen my time, and tried to force me into submission every chance they got. But this was the final straw. They had crossed the line. And now, I was going to make sure they regretted it. Instead of calling them. Immediately we set a trap. Mark had connections. Within 24 hours, he arranged for someone from corporate security to call my parents, pretending to be an investigator. They told my parents that they were looking into the fraud claims and needed more details. And because my mother was an absolute idiot, she fell for it. She spilled everything. She admitted that she was the one who made the complaint. She even said, she owes us and we were just trying to teach her a lesson. We got the entire conversation recorded. And then, just to twist the knife, the investigator casually mentioned, by the way, filing false reports like this is a serious crime. It could lead to a lawsuit, even jail time. The panic in my mother's voice when she realized she was caught? Pure gold. Once we had the recording, I finally called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice shrill. How dare you set us up? Do you know what you've done? I let her scream. I let her get it all out. Then, when she finally ran out of steam, I said, "Did you really think I wouldn't fight back?" Silence. I continued, "You've stolen from me, tried to ruin my job, and lied about me. But guess what? It backfired." My dad suddenly got on the phone, his voice tight. "Listen, we can fix this. We're family." I laughed. "You mean the same family that tried to get me fired?" More silence. Then I dropped the bomb. "We have proof of what you did, and we're considering pressing charges." My mother made a high-pitched choking noise. "You wouldn't?" "Wouldn't I?" I said calmly. I let that sink in. And for the first time in my entire life, I had the upper hand. "You are dead to me," I said. "Don't ever contact me again." Then I hung up. And that was the last time I ever spoke to them. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. But my parents? They weren't done. Because after I cut them off, they tried one last trick. They ran to the rest of the family, spinning the story their way. I got a text from my younger sister a few days later. "Mom and Dad are telling everyone you abandoned us. They said you stole from the family and ran off. They're even telling Grandma that you won't give them money for food." That last one made me pause. They were playing the victim. Again. I called my grandmother immediately. She picked up, her voice sharp. "I can't believe you," she snapped. "After everything they've done for you?" I sighed. "Grandma, how much did they ask you for?" She hesitated. They needed help covering bills. They said you refused to support them." I laughed bitterly. "Grandma, they tried to steal my bonus. Then they tried to get me kicked out of my apartment. Then they faked a fraud case against me at work." Silence. Then, very quietly, she said, "They didn't tell me that." "Of course they didn't," I said. So I told her everything. The stolen money from my childhood. The manipulation. The attempted bank fraud. The landlord stunt. The fake fraud accusation at work. By the time I was done, she was fuming. "That ungrateful pair," she muttered. "I'll handle this." And oh, she did. The next day, I woke up to absolute chaos. Apparently, my grandmother had gone off on my parents. She called my aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. She told them everything. And ripped into my parents for lying. By the end of the day, half the family had cut them off. My mother called me, screaming, "How could you turn everyone against us?" I stayed calm. I just told the truth. She was livid. She threw every insult she could think of. But I just listened, letting her dig her own grave. When she finally ran out of steam, I said, "By the way, I spoke to a lawyer." Silence. I continued, "I reported the attempted bank fraud. And I made sure the landlord knows. If you try anything again, there will be legal consequences." Her breath hitched. "You wouldn't?" "I already did." Then, for the first time in my entire life, my mother begged, "Please, we didn't mean to." I hung up. Then I blocked both my parents. You'd think that would be enough. But I wanted to make sure they never pulled this on anyone else. So I did a little digging. Turns out, my parents had taken out loans in my name when I was younger. Not a lot. But enough that they were hoping I'd never notice. Guess what? I noticed. I filed a fraud report, provided all the proof I could, and let the system do its thing. The bank launched an investigation. And within a few weeks, my parents got hit with criminal charges. Loan fraud. Attempted identity theft. They called me from a different number, begging me to drop the charges. I didn't answer. My grandmother and the rest of the extended family cut them off completely. Turns out, my parents had been mooching off of everyone for years. Not just me. With their reputations ruined, they had no one left to manipulate. The last I heard, they had to sell the house to cover their debts. They moved into a tiny apartment, still trying to scam people. But now, no one was falling for it. As for me, I thrived. I moved into a better apartment. I got another promotion a year later. And I used my bonus, asterisk asterisk, not for my parents, not for their lies, not for their games, asterisk asterisk, but for myself. And I've never looked back. A while ago, my sister texted me again. "Mom and Dad are struggling. They want to talk to you." I just replied, "That's funny." Then I blocked her too. 'cause I owe them nothing.